The 7 cardinal rules to apply Mediterranean principles to your diet without actually having to go full bore into a Mediterranean diet. If you can follow these 7 things and just sprinkle these 7 rules into your lifestyle, you will ultimately be following as close to a Mediterranean diet and lifestyle as you can without having to really segment your life and become this Mediterranean person, right? So let's jump right into the first one. The first one is opting for leaner cuts of meat. I still recommend eating lots of meat, okay? I know that makes me some enemies, but I like meat and I think meat is important. But opting for leaner cuts is going to be very important. Even when I was very strict keto for a number of years, I still recommended leaner cuts of meat. For that reason, it was mainly because I couldn't control how much fat was in ribeye. It's so easy to overdo it. So for the Mediterranean diet, lots of fish, fair bit of eggs, lots of poultry, a fair bit of pork, a good amount of shellfish, and a little bit of lean red meat. And it depends on which region of the Mediterranean you look at and where the red meat's gonna be. But here's the thing. Up until recently, we always thought, oh, maybe the Mediterranean didn't have a lot of red meat. Maybe that's the reason why Mediterranean is so good. But there is a recent study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that took a look at a Mediterranean diet along with either 500 grams volume, not like 500 grams of protein, 500 grams of red meat and pork, but lean cuts of red meat, compared to 200 grams of lean red meat and pork, plus 300 grams of poultry. So 500 grams of lean red meat and pork versus a mix of lean red meat, pork, and poultry. What they found is that the lean red meat group had better cholesterol levels and lower LDL than the group that had the mix. This is huge news because this tells us that even if you're doing Mediterranean, red meat is still fine. It's still an awesome source of heme iron. It's still an awesome source of nutrition and vitamins and minerals. We can do it just without having a fatty cut. So you may want to opt for the fillets. You may want to opt for just those leaner cuts. Don't blame the red meat for something that's not the red meat's fault. You just want to choose the leaner cuts. So that is cardinal rule number 1, is just choose the leaner meats. Cardinal rule number 2 that you can sprinkle in no matter what you're doing: high monounsaturated fatty acids and high polyunsaturated fatty acids. And I'll explain what that looks like as far as what you can put into your diet in just a second. There was an interesting study that took a look at different forms of the Mediterranean diet and different forms of fats that were coming in. Okay, I'm gonna abbreviate and call them PUFAs, which is polyunsaturated fatty acids, and MUFAs, which are monounsaturated fatty acids. So one group had a high MUFA, high PUFA, and low saturated fat. Another group had high MUFA, high PUFA, and high saturated fat. Another group had low PUFA, high MUFA, and low saturated fat. And the final group had low PUFA, low MUFA, and low saturated fat. The groups that had the high MUFA and the high PUFA, high monounsat and high polyunsaturated, ended up having the best overall outcomes, ranging from all kinds of different metabolic markers, cardioprotective markers, and overall just risk factors. So having those high monounsaturated fats and high PUFAs are really good. So where do you get them? How do you sprinkle this into your life without going full-blown Mediterranean? Okay, as far as PUFAs are concerned, a moderate amount of nuts, a moderate amount of maybe almonds, Brazil nuts, things like that. But you start going down this omega-6 kind of seed oil crazy thing for a while, right? So you don't want to go too far. I recommend your polyunsaturated fats come from fish. Try to get them from fish, shellfish, things like that. But the monounsaturated fats, you don't have to eat specific Mediterranean fats. That's what people are like, I guess I could only have olives and olive oil. No, see, that's the thing. Because this is a principle, it doesn't need to literally be a Mediterranean food. So we have olive oil and olives, but we also have avocados, which are really not Mediterranean because most of them are avocados from Mexico. So with that, that's not Mediterranean, but avocados are monounsaturated fats, avocado oil, okay? Also macadamia nuts, macadamia nut oil. Not really grown in the Mediterranean, but nothing fits a Mediterranean principle more than a macadamia nut. So those are the kinds of fats you want to be adding in. So you can go on Google and look up foods rich in monounsaturated fats. Okay, that'll help you out with what you should add in. You're much better off adding those in than anything else.
After today's video, I put a link down below for the meat that I use. It's from a company called ButcherBox. Has been on this channel for pushing a decade now. I have been a supporter of them simply because the quality of their meat, But let's really be real. It's the taste that keeps me coming back. The taste of the meat is one of the best I've ever had, especially their ground beef. I am a ground beef nerd. I love ground beef. It is a staple for me because it's quick and easy. I've got little kids. I can cook up ground beef and be done in 5 seconds. It's easy. And their ground beef and their ground bison are so superb. So that is a special link down below. You can even check out some of the custom cuts that I personally recommend. So I've created like, these are the types that Thomas orders. This is what Thomas's box. That way you know what I'm eating. So that link for ButcherBox, where they deliver the grass-fed, grass-finished meat directly to your doorstep, it's in the top line of the description underneath this video. And again, it gets delivered super easy peasy. They don't just have red meat though. They have chicken, they have pork, they have fish, they have hot dogs, all kinds of stuff, all sustainable and grass-fed, grass-finished.
The third cardinal rule is fractal eating. What the heck is that? Well, you know I'm a fan of intermittent fasting if you've followed my channel for a while. But intermittent fasting isn't necessarily what you have to do. Fractal eating is just where you have very clear and defined periods where you're eating and not eating. Okay, so it's no more snacking, no more grazing. One thing that's true with the Mediterranean culture is they get up, they might sit down and have a breakfast. A lot of times they don't even have breakfast. They'll sit down for lunch, they'll sit down for dinner, and they'll be with their family. And they're not grazing throughout the day. They have these defined meals. And that is very important because it allows insulin levels to stabilize, and that allows fat loss to kick in, but it also allows metabolic benefits to occur. There was a cool study published in the American College of Cardiology where they noted that a big piece of the Mediterranean diet and lifestyle is that they naturally follow a time-restricted eating pattern. They naturally sort of fast. They naturally kind of eat within like a 10 to 12 hour window. So they naturally kind of fast for 14 hours, which is kind of interesting. So they follow this approach without even knowing that they're doing it before it was ever even a thing. And then if we look at newer data, there was a study published in October of 2022 in Cell Metabolism that took a look at firefighters, 137 of them that were working like 24-hour shift work. Shift work messes up the metabolism. So in order to fix these guys, it takes a lot. So what it had them do is it had them do a regular Mediterranean style diet or a Mediterranean diet with a 14-hour fast. Not even 16, just very basic 14-hour and having a 10-hour eating period. Results were really cool. They had massive changes in their VLDL particle size. So VLDL is the one form of LDL that we know is not good. LDL is up in the air, whether it's good or bad. But if you get a fractionated panel, you see VLDL is the one we really need to watch out for. But they also saw big improvements in their HbA1c, okay, so their 90-day glucose really, and also improvements in their diastolic blood pressure. Diets were the same, just the eating timing. Okay, so Mediterranean plus early time restricted feeding is very, very powerful. They work in tandem together. With the insulin sensitivity that you get from monounsaturated fats combined with low levels of insulin from having breaks from food, it's a huge thing to add in. So I mix that up. Now, the next one is eating foods that are rich in antioxidants. Now, it sounds generic, right? But I try to load up as much as I can. And if you look at the data, you see, a Mediterranean diet is rich in these. And there was a study that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It took a look at over 3,000 people, and it measured how closely they adhered to a Mediterranean diet. The closer that they followed a Mediterranean diet, and the more they adhered to Mediterranean principles, the higher their antioxidant levels were in their bodies. Okay, now in this particular case, they noted that most of the antioxidants were coming from fruit. So the higher the antioxidant level in those following Mediterranean also seemed to eat the highest amount of fruit. So what I get from this is, okay, my carbohydrates should predominantly be coming from fruit. I'm not getting a lot of value out of grains. I'm not getting a lot of value out of like pasta, right? I might eat some lentils now and then. I might even eat some pasta made out of lentils or some chickpeas, things like that. But the bulk of my carbs are coming from things like lentils, chickpeas, and mainly fruit. Okay, so I get a lot of antioxidants from fruit, from my strawberries, from my raspberries, occasionally things like pears, apples, these Mediterranean fruits. Apples and pears are very Mediterranean, and believe it or not, they're not super high sugar like people think they are. The fiber content is so high, it also helps out a lot. So that's just a big principle. Like, when you think about this, if you follow these cardinal rules, next thing you know, you kind of are eating Mediterranean. Number 5 is when I eat my saturated fats, I'm getting them predominantly from eggs and from cheeses. So I'm not getting a lot of saturated fat from other sources. I'm definitely not getting like plant sources of saturated fat. I'm not eating a lot of palm oil or anything like that. I don't even eat a lot of coconut oil anymore. And if I do, it is not refined, because the data shows that refined coconut oil causes problems. Unrefined virgin coconut oil is fine, but that's beside the point. So the eggs, obviously a huge benefit. The most abundant amino acid profile, one of the most nutritious foods you could ever eat. So I don't need to say a lot there. Okay, but the cheeses, I go for the aged cheeses. I go for Pecorino Romano, I go for regular Romano, I go for aged Parmesan, I go for aged Gouda, I go for aged Swiss. I always go for the aged cheeses because it breaks down the lactose, so it's easier to metabolize. And it also ends up having more microbes in it, so it's good for the gut. If I do have additional dairy, it's almost always raw. In Europe and some areas of the Mediterranean, it's pretty easy to get raw dairy. In the United States, there's only a few states that actually make it legal, so it's difficult. So fortunately, where I am in California, I can get raw dairy. So I'll even have raw cheese, I'll have raw yogurt, I'll have raw kefir, I'll have raw cream, and it's delicious. And the saturated fat in that never causes a problem with me, because even if I have a lot of this stuff, it doesn't add up to all that much when the bulk of my calories are coming from lean protein to begin with. Okay, so number 6 is sun, specifically red sun. So trying to get sunlight in the morning, which we know Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about, ad nauseum, right? Like all the time. So we don't need to talk about the benefits. But there was a study published in Diabetes Care that found that subjects that were diabetic ended up having higher HbA1c and higher glucose and higher insulin in the wintertime. And started to figure out, okay, is it because they're more sedentary? Maybe, but more so, even if they're still active, they're just inside more. So we start looking at other data, we see, okay, vitamin D plays a huge role here, but also being out in the sun increases nitric oxide levels in the body. So that makes it so that you have better blood flow, better vasodilation, so glucose and nutrients can get to the cell better. The other thing is a little bit of stress from the sun is very good. It increases what's called heme oxygenase, which is something that helps combat the stress from the sun, which has positive effects on our glucose and positive effects on our metabolism. So yes, a little bit of sun stress is good. Too much is obviously too much. So it is a cardinal rule for me. No matter what, I find a way to get sunlight. And if it's cloudy out, I spend a little bit more time. If it's freezing, I use a red light. Light becomes a nutrient for me. And I don't think that the Mediterranean cultures are sitting there thinking about the sun as that. They're just doing it. They're outside, they walk, they're exposed to the sun. Which leads me to the final cardinal rule. Move a lot. Okay, even if you apply 2 of these things, and not all of them, but you move a lot, and you stop sitting down so much, and you walk, and you say, you know what, the store's a half mile, I'm gonna walk to the store this time. Things like that. Try to live as the Mediterraneans would live. Get outside and move. So I walk 10,000 steps a day minimum. And if I can't make 10,000 steps for whatever reason, because I'm on an airplane or something, I make up for it the next day. So 70,000 steps a week minimum, which isn't that much at all. That's like low level, white belt level stuff. Okay, you can do a lot more than that. And if you can't walk, ride a stationary bike, ride a bike, do something, but be moving more than you are sitting. So to recap, lean meats, including lean red meat, which is totally fine. Monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. So macadamia nuts, a little bit of almonds, a little bit of cashews here and there, maybe some Brazil nuts, some fattier cuts of fish, some shellfish, some avocados, some olive oil, some avocado oil, macadamia nut oil, okay? Then fractal eating. Take breaks between your meals or occasionally fast. High antioxidant intake, predominantly from fruit, whenever you can. Aged cheeses for your saturated fat intake and eggs for your saturated fat intake. Prioritize sun exposure. Get out in the sun in the morning and move. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.